Vishadharani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Right. So welcome back to this Nectar of Devotion sessions. So yesterday we completed chapter 2 and today we'll attempt to complete 3, 4 and 5. Okay. So just a quick recap of what we have seen. In the introduction and first chapter, we saw the subject matter of this book, Mangalacharan, and then we saw what the definition of pure devotional service. Then in the first chapter, we saw the characteristics of pure devotional service. There are totally 6 characteristics. In second chapter, we saw a few definitions of different types of bhakti, sadhana, bhava and prema. Then within sadhana bhakti, we saw Vaidhi sadhana bhakti and Raganuga sadhana bhakti, and we saw the definition of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti and how it is to be executed. In this chapter, we are going to discuss about eligibility of the candidate for accepting devotional service. So who can take up devotional service? Is there a qualification that is required? Is there an entrance test to get into devotional service? So that is something that we are going to discuss here. And so we'll just see the divisions in this chapter. So first, Srila Prabhupada writes, who is eligible or qualified for Vaidhi sadhana bhakti? There are basically 2 things. One who has unflinching faith in Krishna and in the process of devotional service, he is qualified for Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, which is possible by association of devotees. Okay, so these are the 2 characteristics or 2 points which makes one qualified for Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. And within that, there are 3 classes of candidate eligible for pure devotional service. There's Uttamadhikari, there's Madhyamadhikari, and then there is Kanishthaadhikari. We have already discussed about these 3 in our Nectar of Instruction classes as well as in Ishopanishad, Mantra 7. We will see how it goes here. Then Srila Prabhupada elaborates on the 4 types of neophytes. The Kanishthaadhikari, who are these 4? And takes reference from Bhagavad Gita 7:16. Chaturvidha bhajante mam jana sukritam arjuna arto jignasur artharthi jnani cha bharatarshava. These are the 4 who are actually on the neophyte platform. Why are they on the neophyte platform? We will see that. We'll discuss on it. So it's an analysis has been done. Bhakti doesn't arise until one gives up the desire for bhukti and mukti. So the qualification is that one must have unflinching faith in the process of devotional service, which can be arrived at by association of devotees. And the result of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, which we discussed yesterday as bhava and ultimately prema, it did not come up or it doesn't come up till one gives up the desire for material enjoyment and for impersonal liberation. So devotees therefore should never desire liberation. And there are references which tells the transcendental bliss of devotional service overshadows impersonal liberation. And if you have read chapter 4, we discussed this yesterday as well, that there are several references, almost 29 verses are there, out of which around 20 to 22 speak or give only references about how impersonal liberation and material enjoyment is insignificant. So Srila Rupa Goswami is basically stressing or pushing the point that a devotee should never desire for these things. Devotional service is not meant for advancing in material life. Devotional service is not meant for improving our material comforts. Because I'm suffering from some misery, therefore let's chant Hare Krishna and mitigate that misery. No, these are not the goals of devotional service. And to get free from material entanglement also is not the goal of devotional service. And just to remind that what we are discussing here is only about Uttama Bhakti or pure devotional service. We are not discussing anything about mixed devotional service, Karma Mishra Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti or other forms. So pure devotional service is meant only for attaining love for Krishna. Okay, that's it. Right. So Srila Prabhupada writes, On the account of his association with Mahatmas or great souls, 100% of the devotional service of the Lord, one may attain a little bit of attraction for Sri Krishna. But at the same time, one may remain very much attached to fruitive activities and material sense enjoyment and not be prepared to undergo the different types of renunciation. See, we'll just see this translation of this verse. So, Sri Rupa Goswami writes, the qualified person is described as follows. The person who has developed faith in serving the Lord by impressions arising from previous association with devotees. So, he has developed faith because he has got favorable impressions about devotional service through the association of devotees. He is not too attached to material objects and he is not too detached as well. Na tisakto na vairagya. Asakti means attachment. He is not too much attached to material enjoyment. At the same time, he is not too much detached as well. So that kind of person is qualified for Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Now, why it is mentioned that one is not too attached to material objects and one is not too detached, there's a reason behind that. So that's explained by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and we will see that. But the main point that we have to understand is that one can take up pure devotional service only when he comes in contact with a pure devotee. We discussed this yesterday and day before, on previous week as well, that devotional service arises only in association of devotees. Such a person, if he has unflinching attraction to Krishna, becomes an eligible candidate for discharging devotional service. So these are the 2 points: association with Mahatmas and unflinching attraction. So one who has these two, he becomes an eligible candidate for discharging devotional service. Okay. This attraction for Krishna consciousness and association of pure devotees is the sign of great fortune. Right? It's ati bhagyena. Yah kenapyati bhagyena jata shraddhosya sevane. So only a person who has great fortune comes in association with the pure devotees, or coming in association with pure devotees itself is a great fortune for a person, because that's where his eternal life starts. Till that point, when he's not in association with the devotees, with pure devotees, his eternal life is not manifest. He's undergoing repeated birth and death. So fortune arises when one starts starts his eternal life in pure devotional service. So it's confirmed by Lord Chaitanya that by mercy of both bona fide spiritual master and Krishna will get the seed of devotional service. Brahmade Brahmide Kone Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. Right? So in this connection, Lord Krishna says, my dear Uddhava, only by exceptional fortune does someone become attracted to me. And even if one is not completely detached from fruitive activities or is not completely attached to devotional service, such service is quickly effective. So even if one is not able to completely give up fruitive activities and he is not completely attached to devotional service also, but still he is qualified or eligible for devotional service. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments. He says, Nati Saktaha means devoid of extreme attachment to body, house and family. See, we saw this verse, correct? Nati Sakta na Vairagya. So it's not too much materially attached also. So, Na Ati Saktaha means he's devoid of extreme attachment to body, house and family. And he says, Na Nirvinna, not detached, means if the person is completely disgusted with sense objects, he's qualified for Jnana, not Bhakti. If he's too attached to sense objects, he's qualified for Karma. If the person is devoid of extreme attachment, then that person is qualified for devotional service. In future, in forthcoming chapters, we will see the concept of Falgu Vairagya and Yukta Vairagya. Right? Srila Prabhupada spoke a lot about it. So if one person is too detached from matter, then he cannot engage those things which can be engaged in Krishna's service. Okay. And if a person is too attached, then he will end up keeping himself in the center. He'll be materially motivated. He cannot engage those objects in Krishna's service, but he'll engage those objects only in his service. So therefore, one should not be too materially attached and one should not be too materially detached as well. So those who are somewhat attached but not much, and somewhat detached but not much, are qualified for Vaidhi Bhakti. But then there's a qualifier also. And that is that even if someone is, let's see if it's here. Okay, yeah. So the cause of too much attachment is beginningless ignorance. So let us read this. Thus, there are three persons qualified by three types of attachment. There's a person qualified for jnana, there's a person qualified for karma, and there's a person qualified for bhakti. Disgust with objects is caused by purification at the heart arising from practice of nishkama karma. So nishkama karma leads to jnana. In Bhagavad Gita, we have spoken about this, chapter 3, 4, and 5, that nishkama karma yoga leads to transcendental knowledge. So therefore, purification of heart arises. And transcendental knowledge means one becomes completely detached from anything material. The cause of too much attachment is beginningless ignorance. Avidya causes too much attachment. The cause of being devoid of too much attachment is the unexpected association with exalted devotees alone, which is reiterating the same fact that one can take up pure devotional service only by association of Mahatmas. Correct? These respective causes should be noted. However, there are seen cases of extraordinary qualification. By the unexpected association of the devotee, even a person extremely attached to sense objects, Indriyavan, becomes qualified for bhakti. Correct? So this, if we see the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, this is manifest, where people are totally attached to materialistic life, but still they take up devotional service. Right. So devotees may be divided into three classes. So there are three persons qualified for Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti: the Uttamadhikari, the Madhyamadhikari, and Kanishtadhikari. So at this point, we should understand that Uttamadhikari here does not mean a person or a devotee on the prema stage or a bhava or prema stage. It's an Uttama Adhikari. He is a person who can take up Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So he has not developed bhava or he has not developed pure love of Krishna at this point. But then he's a best candidate for taking up Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Then there is Madhyamadhikari. So Madhyamadhikari is the second class Adhikari or a person eligible for pure devotional service or Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. And Kanishtha is the lowest class. So these are the Adhikaris or one who has the qualification to take up Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So Uttama does not mean one who is on the bhava or prema stage. Okay. So the devotee in the first or uppermost class is described as follows. He is very expert in the study of relevant scriptures. He is expert in putting forward arguments in terms of scriptures. He can very nicely present conclusions with perfect discretion. He understands perfectly that the ultimate goal of life is to attain transcendental loving service of Krishna. So he understands, but he has not reached that goal yet. Still, he is Uttamadhikari. He knows that Krishna is the only object of worship and love. The first class devotee is one who has strictly followed the rules and regulations under the training of bona fide spiritual master and has sincerely obeyed him in accord with revealed scriptures. He is fully trained to preach and become a spiritual master himself. He never deviates from the principles of higher authority. He attains firm faith in scriptures by understanding with all reason and arguments. And these reason and arguments are based on revealed scriptures. He is not interested in dry speculative methods. And he has attained mature determination in the matter of devotional service. So these are the 12 points, qualifying points of an Uttamadhikari. Okay. A devotee with above qualities is considered Uttamadhikari for Vaidhi Bhakti. Right? So it's not Prema Bhakti. Then Madhyamadhikari. The second class devotee has been defined by the following symptoms. He is not very expert in arguing on the strength of revealed scripture. He has firm faith in the objective. So what's the distinction between Uttamadhikari and a Madhyamadhikari? Madhyamadhikari is not very expert in arguing on the strength of revealed scriptures, but he's very fixed in his determination to follow all the rules and regulations and all the services which is given to him by his spiritual master. It's just that he cannot argue on the strength of revealed scriptures. Whereas an Uttamadhikari is trained to preach and he's expert in putting forward arguments in terms of scriptures. And he can present perfect conclusions with perfect discretion. So this is what distinguishes between a Uttamadhikari and a Madhyamadhikari. The purport is that he has firm faith in the procedure of devotional service, but he may sometimes fail to offer arguments. Sometimes fail. So he is also learned. He also knows the knowledge. That's why he is firmly fixed in his determination. But sometimes he might fail to offer arguments. But still his faith is never diminished or his faith is never shaken. His faith is always undaunted. So he's undoubted within himself as to his decision that Krishna is the supreme object of worship. So even if he's defeated in so-called argument from someone and he's not able to offer argument, but still he is himself convinced that the process which I'm following is perfect. Although I'm not able to offer arguments to defeat the other person, but still I'm completely convinced that what I'm doing is right. Okay. Then Kanishtha has Komala Shraddha or weak faith. So his faith is not strong. At the same time, he does not recognize the decision of the revealed scriptures. The neophyte's faith can be changed by someone with strong arguments or by an opposite decision. Unlike the second class devotee who also cannot put forward arguments and evidences from scripture, but who still has faith in the objective, the neophyte has no firm faith in the objective. Thus, he is called the neophyte devotee. Okay, so his faith can be shaken. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, weak faith in the verse means temporary unsteadiness of the heart when defeated by strong materialistic opponents. Later, the person regains faith in what the Guru has taught by his own judgment. Because if his faith completely goes off, then he's not a devotee anymore. Correct? But then he's a Kanishta Adhikari. So he does have faith in the words of his Guru. And then, although his faith is shaken, but still he can bring himself back by the strength of association of pure devotees. He can still bring himself back in the line of pure devotional service. Right? So we would have seen this, when someone takes up the Krishna consciousness and then he's convinced that this is the ultimate goal of life. And after that, then he tries to tell to his friends, to his family and other people. And his family, his relatives, they say, this is our tradition, that is our tradition. We have been following for these many years. Why you're saying Krishna is Supreme Personality of God? And then he starts thinking, oh, yes. Are these all people fool who have been doing all this for hundreds of years, my ancestors? Doesn't seem like. Maybe there's something still missing. And then his faith is shaken. And he thinks maybe this is not the correct process. Maybe it's better to follow our own family tradition. And then he comes back to temple to discuss this. And then he asks questions. And then again, when we give answers, then he's convinced, yes, I did not think of this point. Now I'll go back to my relatives and reply. So like this, this is Kanishta Adhikari. Although he's convinced, but then he needs that association to be injected into him so that he develops his faith and takes up pure devotional service. Further classification of the neophyte devotee is made in Bhagavad Gita. So this is with reference to chapter 7, verse 16 in Bhagavad Gita. So there are 4 classes of men. The one who is in distress, the one who is in need of money, those who are inquisitive, and the one who is wise. So they begin devotional service and come to the Lord for relief in the matter of respective self-satisfaction. So these 4 are not coming to render devotional service for the pleasure of Krishna. They are coming to Krishna for relieving their material distresses. They go into some place of worship and pray to God for mitigation of material distress or economic development, or to satisfy their inquisitiveness. And a wise man who simply realizes the greatness of God is also counted among the neophytes only. Such beginners can be elevated to second class or first class platform if they associate with pure devotees. Right? So, and Srila Prabhupada then gives 4 examples of neophyte devotees. You see, an example of the neophyte class is Maharaj Dhruva. But then Maharaj Dhruva is not a neophyte devotee. But the point is that he achieved or he approached the Lord with some material interest inside him. So therefore, when he approached the Lord, he should be categorized as a Kanishtadhikari. But after he attained perfection, it's attained pure love of God. He is on the perfection platform. So this is only speaking about those personalities who approach the Lord with some material interest. But by the purificatory potency of pure devotional service, they were completely purified of all their material contamination and they became pure devotees of the Lord. We should not think that these examples of Maharaj Dhruva, then Gajendra, then the Kumaras and Shaunaka, they are not pure devotees. They are Kanishtadhikaris. So therefore, they are on the same level as we are. No, they are on the topmost level that mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. The point is that they approach the Lord with some material intent. And still, because their intensity was so severe, by the purificatory agent of pure devotional service, they were completely mitigated of all material desires. So an example of neophyte class is Maharaj Dhruva. And he was an Arthi. He wanted a kingdom greater than his grandfather. It was Lord Brahma, the creator of this universe. So he wanted a kingdom greater than him. That was his desire. So he's a Artharthi. He accepted material, he wanted a material benediction. But when he engaged himself in devotional service, in the end, he was completely purified. And he declined to accept any material benediction from the Lord. Right? Similarly, Gajendra was distressed. He's Artha, one who is in distressful condition. He was distressed. So therefore, he prayed to the Lord to mitigate that distress. So this for protection. After which he became a pure devotee when the Lord appeared to him. Similarly, Sanak, Sanatan, Sanatan, and Sanat Kumar were all in the category of wise, saintly persons. And they were also attracted by devotional service. They were the Gyanis. So they did not have anything material to desire from the Lord. But they were not devotees of the Lord as well. They were Brahmavadis. They knew about the transcendental aspect of the Lord. According to them, everything is Brahman. So they knew that the absolute truth has both the features, the personal feature as well as the impersonal feature. But they were most attracted to the impersonal feature of the Lord. They were not attracted to the personal feature. And they did not have anything material to gain from the Lord. So therefore, they are these wise people who are completely materially detached, who are situated in spiritual transcendental platform, but still they are not the devotees of the Lord. They have not taken up to pure devotional service. So therefore, they are these wise people. The Kumaras are perfect examples for that. And in the end, what happened? They were attracted by devotional service when they smelled tulsi, which is offered, tulsi with flowers, which is offered at the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. A similar thing happened in the assemblage of Naimisharanya forest, headed by sage Shaunaka. They were inquisitive and were always asking Suta Goswami about Krishna. Thus they achieved the association of a pure devotee and became pure devotees themselves, Jigyasu. And you see, Shaunaka Rishi is actually in the Puranas, in several Puranas, it's Shaunaka Rishi who's asking questions to Suta Goswami. And is asking about the glories of heavenly planets, asking about different demigods. That's why the Shiva Purana, Linga Purana, all these Puranas came up because they are inquisitive to know about all these things, about the happenings in the cosmology, about the creation of Lord Brahma. But in association with Suta Goswami, what happened? Completely their hearts changed. And finally they wanted to hear about Srimad Bhagavatam. You see in the first few chapters of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shaunaka Rishi, it is mentioned that Shaunakadi Rishis in the Naimisharanya forest were engaged in 1,000 years sacrifice, trying to mitigate the effects of Kali. And they asked 6 questions to Suta Goswami about what is the best thing that can be done in this Kali Yuga. Because by this point, by this time, they were completely purified. And then when Suta Goswami he spoke the second chapter about Krishna and so many different verses about the potency of Krishna's pure devotional service, and that being the highest, then Shaunaka Rishi was completely transformed. He took up pure devotional service along with the rishis in Naimisharanya. So that's why Srimad Bhagavatam, being said as the last writing of Vyasadeva, confirms that Shaunaka Rishi, after he listening to all these different narrations from Suta Goswami about Puranas and Itihasas, then finally he became convinced by his association that devotional service to Krishna is the topmost platform that a person can achieve. So therefore he is Jigyasu. He was inquisitive about so many things, but then finally he attained pure devotional service. So that is the way of elevating oneself. In whatever condition one may be, if he is fortunate enough to associate with pure devotees, then very quickly he is elevated to the second class or first class platform. Right? So 4 devotees are all been accepted. So this is a summary of relevant section in Bhagavad Gita chapter 7. See, this commentary or the summary by Srila Prabhupada is basically from 716 to 719, I think, 4 verses. So it's basically elaborating on this. So these 4 types of devotees have been accepted as pious. Without being pious, no one can come to devotional service. This is 728. Correct? It is explained in Bhagavad Gita that only one who has continually executed pious activities and whose sinful reactions in life have completely stopped can take to Krishna consciousness. Other cannot. Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante maam dridhavrataha. Yesham tvantagatam papam, ones whose sinful reaction have been completely destroyed. And Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam, who's engaged in pious activities, they can take up to Krishna consciousness, whereas other cannot. The neophyte devotees are classified into 4 groups according to the gradations of pious activities. So one who has mitigated all his sinful reactions and who's engaged in pious activities, then he can take up to pure devotional service. So these four, which are mentioned in 716, they have classified based on the gradations of pious activities which they have done. Without pious activities, if a man in a distress condition, he becomes an agnostic, a communist, or something like that. But if he does not have any pious credits, pious activities to his credit, then what he does, he becomes an agnostic, an atheist, a communist, because he does not have faith in the Lord. Although these four have material intent, but still they approached the Lord because they are pious. One who is impious, he will not approach the Lord. He will become inimical to the Lord. Because there is so much material distance, therefore there is no God. Correct? So many people say that. So this is because they do not have any pious activities in their credit. Because he does not formally believe in God, he thinks that he can adjust his distressed condition by totally disbelieving in him. Because there is so much suffering in this material world, therefore there is no God. It's a classic atheistic argument. Because there is no pious credit in them. So wise man who is not an impersonalist is very dear as he doesn't seek exchange of material benefits. So Krishna in Gita, he explains of the four types, the one who is wise is very dear to him. Because a wise man, if he is attached to Krishna, is not seeking an exchange of material benefits. Correct? So this is 17. How does the word start? It is Chaturveda Parantam, Janasya Kritana, Harta Jikyasva, Kati Gyani Sajapashva. Tesham Gyani Nityuktas, Eka Bhaktir Vishishate, Priyohi Gyanyothartam, Aham Sacha Mama Priyaha. So Gyani is very dear to me, Krishna says. This means that from the very beginning, his basic principle of attachment to Krishna is more or less love. Furthermore, due to his wisdom and study of Shastra, he can understand also that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the other three, so of the four, the wise man is he has the highest pious credit or Sukriti, you can say. But still, because they have taken all the other three have also taken devotional service, they are magnanimous. Udara sarva eveti, jnani tvatmeva. So udara sarva eveti, all these four which Krishna has mentioned, they are all magnanimous. That after many, many births, when one actually becomes wise, he surrenders on to Vasudeva. Bahunam janmanamante, jnanavan mam prapadyate, Vasudeva sarvamiti, samahatma sudurlabha. Knowing perfectly that Krishna is the origin and cause of all causes. Therefore, he sticks to the lotus feet of Krishna and gradually develops love for him. Although such a wise man is very dear to Krishna, the other are also accepted as very magnanimous because they have come to Krishna for fulfilling their material desires. They are all accepted as liberal, broad-minded Mahatmas. So even those four are also to be considered as Mahatmas only. Right? Without being elevated to the position of Jnani, one cannot stick to the principle of worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So although Artha, Artharthi and Jigyasu may take up devotional service for fulfilling their needs, once their needs are fulfilled, they'll give up devotional service. Many times. Although the examples which we saw, it's not like that. But then, practically in our life, we have seen those who take up devotional service only to mitigate their miseries. Their whole focus was that my problem should be solved. And once it is solved, then there's no affection. It's like a business transaction. So although they are considered devotees at that point when they are praying to the Lord, but still it's temporary, it's flickering. So therefore, without coming to the position of a jnani, it is not possible to stick or to attach oneself to devotional service. So that is required. The less intelligent or those whose intelligence has been taken away by the spell of Maya are attached to different demigods on account of influence of the modes of nature. So some people, the less intelligent, they go to demigods as well to fulfill their desires. Right? Kamaste hita jnana prapaddanti anya devataha tam tam nivamasthaya prakrita niyata svaya. So they take to different demigods. But the wise man is he who has thoroughly understood that he is spirit soul and not simply a body. Because he realizes that his spirit and Krishna is Supreme Spirit, he knows that his intimate relationship should be with Krishna, not with this body. So you see, in context of what we have been discussing, this is the eligibility of taking up pure devotional service. So there are this neophyte class, this Madhyamadhikari, and then there is Uttamadhikari. And then within the neophyte class, there are these four, Artha, Artharthi, Jigyasu, Jnani. These four. Among these four, the Jnani is considered to be the topmost eligible candidate for taking up pure devotional service, whereas the others are also magnanimous, but they can take up to pure devotional service only in association of devotees. Only when they come, all these three come in association with pure devotees, then they can be fixed in pure devotional service. Whereas for a wise man, is already learned in Shastra. And he knows that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead by his study of Shastra. So his faith is unflinching. And he can go and take up pure devotional service very nicely. Thereby Krishna says that Jnani is just like me. Jnani tvatmaiva me matam. He says, just like me. He's like my own self. Because he can take up to pure devotional service with unflinching faith. Right? What is the two things? Unflinching faith and association with Mahatmas. These are the two eligible things for taking up pure devotional service. Association with Mahatmas is required for the other three. But the Jnani, by the strength of his scriptural knowledge, he can directly take up pure devotional service because he is learned in Shastra by authorized scriptures. And also we see that the other three, like Dhruva Maharaj, Gajendra, and the Shaunaka Rishi, right? Shaunaka Rishi came. He is an example of association with a devotee, association with Mahatma, and then he took up pure devotional service. The wise man or the Kumaras, they, Gajendra and Dhruva, they directly came in association of the Lord. So they took up devotional service for fulfilling their purposes. Not the Kumaras, but the other two, Dhruva Maharaj and Gajendra. They prayed to the Lord to mitigate their suffering, to gain something material. But by the association of the Lord, directly they took up or they became pure devotees. So if you see, in summary, there are three ways that one can take up devotional service. One is in association of pure devotees. Another is when his studies are from revealed scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's a classic example in our Krishna consciousness movement that those who take up or those to whom we give books, that book distribution, they read books and then they take up devotional service. They start chanting, although they are nowhere related to the temple. They don't even come to the temple. They have no association of devotees. Just by reading Bhagavad Gita as it is, or Srimad Bhagavatam, or any of Prabhupada's books, they take up devotional service, start chanting, and then finally become pure devotees also. So many examples are there. So many book distribution stories are there in the West and in India also. So by association, by reading of scriptures, they can take up pure devotional service. And finally, by the causeless mercy of the Lord also, one can become a pure devotee. One can take up pure devotional service. So these are the three ways in which one can take up pure devotional service. But for general, it is mentioned that association with devotees is the best method by which one's unflinching faith arises in the heart. And in one sense, distribution of books also, when one takes up the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, then he's associating with Srila Prabhupada directly because Srila Prabhupada's words are non-different from his personality. So by associating with those words, then also he takes up pure devotional service. So in that way, we can say that even association with devotee happens through the books of Srila Prabhupada because they are live, they are speaking to him. Like this. So these are the 2-3 ways in which one can take up pure devotional service. Right? Okay, so a comparison is given. The distress and artharthi are in the material concept of life and they are in relationship with this body. So they approach the Lord in relationship with this body. The jignasu is a little above because he's not in need of anything material, but then he's inquisitive. But still he's on the material platform because he's on the speculative platform. He's speculation, he's trying to understand through argumentation and logic different things. He's inquisitive, he's jignasu. But a wise man who seeks Krishna knows perfectly well that he is a spirit soul or Brahman, and that Krishna is the supreme spirit soul or Parabrahman. He knows that spirit soul, being subordinate and finite, should always dovetail himself with the infinite and supreme soul, Krishna. It can be concluded that a person who is freed from the bodily concept of life is an eligible candidate for pure devotional service. It is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that after Brahman realization, when one is freed from material anxieties and can see every living entity on an equal level, he is eligible to enter into devotional service. Right? Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma Nashurfitra Kakshati Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhakti Labate Param. So one who is on the Brahma Bhuta platform, then he can take up to pure devotional service. Right. So then from 22 onwards, then a comparison is given that the eligibility for pure devotional service must be qualified with understanding that impersonal liberation and material fruitive activities are actually an hindrance to devotional service. Okay, bhakti, pure devotional service, or one who takes up to pure devotional service should not be attracted by fruitive activities by karma and by jnana. So see the definition again. Anya vilashita shunyam jnana karmati anavritam. So they should be away from jnana and karma. And this particular point will be stressed here. So from this point onwards of third chapter and the totality of fourth chapter, we'll be speaking about this point that one who's eligible to take up devotional service, who takes up pure devotional service, should be detached or should not be attached to karmic activities and should not be cultivating impersonal ideas. He should not be cultivating his desires for impersonal liberation, for moksha. He should not be cultivating kama and moksha. No jnana, no karma. So then the references or explanation of this is being given from this verse onwards, from 1, 2, and 22. You see, the classification analysis starts this way. There are three kinds of happiness: material, spiritual, and devotional. Devotional service and the happiness due to its execution are not possible as long as one is materially affected, which means as long as one has some tendency towards karma and jnana. So devotional service and the happiness that one experiences, transcendental bliss, does not arise for one who takes up to mixed devotional service or who's attached to karma and jnana. Material enjoyment, one who has desire for material enjoyment or becoming one with the Supreme, are both considered material concepts. Impersonalists cannot appreciate spiritual happiness of exchanging of loving affairs, and we saw this yesterday, that impersonal liberation is just like the water which is in the hoof of a calf sprint, whereas the bliss from devotional service is just like an ocean. So we discussed this yesterday. So same concept is being developed now. One who takes up devotional service is completely reject karma and jnana. In the material world, everyone is trying to be the topmost head. Everyone is competing to be greater than others. This greatness can be extended to the unlimited, so that actually one wants to become the greatest of all. This concept, this is basically on the impersonal liberation. If you become one with the Lord, then you can be considered as the greatest. So therefore, this is also a material concept, although maybe a little more advanced. To merge with the Lord, to become one with the Lord, is to think that I am the greatest. So that's the highest manifestation of material false ego. So what's the perfect spiritual concept? It's that the complete knowledge of one's constitutional position in which one knows enough to dovetail himself in transcendental loving service of the Lord. So this is the perfect spiritual concept. Not the material concept that will not give happiness, and even the incomplete spiritual concept of merging with the impersonal Brahmajyoti is also useless. Who can relish the sweet taste? We'll see. So it's not possible to actually become one with the Lord, even if one aspires for it. It is simply not possible, right? Because each and every living entity is individual. Everybody is an individual, either in past, present, as well as in the future. Therefore, anyone who has desire or aspiration for satisfying his senses by becoming more and more important, either in the material sense or in the spiritual sense, cannot actually relish the really sweet taste of devotional service. Rupa Goswami has therefore compared possessing these bhukti and mukti with being influenced by the black heart of a witch. In both cases, one is in trouble. Bhukti means material enjoyment, and mukti means to become freed from material anxiety, to become one with the Lord. And in both cases, one is in trouble because he never attains highest satisfaction. The desires are compared to being haunted by ghosts and witches. No one can relish the actual transcendental taste of devotional service if he is haunted by these. This verse says, if you see the verse, Bhukti mukti sprahayavat pishachi hridi vartate tavat bhakti sukasyatra katham abhyudayo bhavet. Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse several times in his books and his lectures. How can happiness of bhakti arise in the heart when the witch of desire for enjoyment and liberation remains there? So it's compared to a witch. And in Prema Vivarta also, Pishachi paile yena mati chana hai, maya grasta jivera hai, sabhava uday. So it's not possible till the witch of bhukti and mukti is infecting the heart of a living entity. By prema, the bhakti, a pure devotee never cares for liberation. Okay, so from this point onwards, we have quotes, references. Srila Goswami writes several references. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prayed, my dear son of Nanda, I do not want any material happiness, the shape of many followers, nor immense opulence in wealth, nor any beautiful wife. Right? Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitama, jagadisha kamaye. Mama janmani janmarishware bhavatat bhakti rahituki tvai. Not do I want cessation from material existence. I may take birth many times, one after another. But what I pray from you is that my devotion unto you may always remain unflinching. So a pure devotee never desires for anything material. Devotees do not care for mukti. And Bilwa Mangal Thakur said, if I am engaged in devotional service unto my Lord, then very easily I can perceive your presence everywhere. And as far as liberation is concerned, I think liberation stands at my door with folded hands, waiting to serve me. Right? This is a famous verse. So pure devotees, liberation and spiritual emancipation are not very important things. Okay. So this connection, Kapil Dev advised his mother, Devahuti, my dear mother, my pure devotees are charmed by seeing my different forms, the beauty of my face, the structure of my body, so enchanting. By laughing, my pastimes and my glance appear to them so beautiful that their minds are always absorbed in thoughts of me, and their lives are dedicated fully onto me. Although such people do not desire any kind of liberation or any kind of material happiness, still I give them a place among my associates in the supreme abode. So the devotees themselves are not desiring any material happiness or spiritual liberation. But still, because they're engaged in devotional service, the Lord automatically gives all these benefits to the pure devotee. So Srila Prabhupada said, no, we are not working. Every month we are spending 12 lakh rupees worth of things for maintaining our temples, all the different 70, 80 centers we have at that time. We are spending this much amount of money. But we don't work anywhere. We don't work anywhere. We have no other occupation. We are just engaged in pure devotional service. And Krishna supplies. And even in our lives, we would have experienced that if we take up to pure devotional service, our maintenance is taken care of by Krishna. Right? Everything is arranged properly. Automatically it arranges. We don't have to be in anxiety of whether Krishna will maintain us or not. We just have to take up pure devotional service and some arrangement will be made that Krishna will provide all the necessities. And this is famous instance also when the temple in Bury Place in London, the devotees did not have money to give as rent for maintaining the temple. And Shyam Sundar Prabhu was there at that time, and then he was walking through this, I think it's Oxford Street or one of the side lanes of Oxford Street, and he was thinking of what can be done and praying to Krishna, what can be done. So that time he saw the pound bills automatically flying in the air. And then he saw them coming to him and he started collecting them. And finally, when he counted them, it was the exact amount that is required for the rent of the temple. Right? So some way or the other, Krishna will maintain. We don't really have to think of whether Krishna will maintain us or not. So material wise, he will maintain, and so that way we will always be satisfied and we only have to engage in pure devotional service. And Krishna also takes his devotees back home, back to Godhead, so that they engage in devotional service to him there. So a devotee does not want any liberation, but the Lord, by his causeless mercy, he takes the devotee back home, back to Godhead, so that the devotee can then engage in service of the Lord. So it's a reciprocation by Krishna to his devotees, although the devotee never desires any type of liberation. Sayuja he does not desire, but the other four types also, Salokya, Sarshti, Samipya, and what is Sarshti? Salokya, Samipya, Sarshti, and Sarupya. Yes, Sarupya, correct. So these four also the devotee does not desire, but still the Lord gives it as a reciprocation to the devotee. So this is what this verse is speaking. So this evidence from Srimad Bhagavatam is assurance to the pure devotee of being elevated to association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, going back home, back to Godhead. So transcendental bliss of devotional service overshadows liberation. One who is actually attracted by the beauty of the lotus feet of Krishna is always full in transcendental bliss and naturally never aspire after the liberation. So Uddhava speaks to Krishna in 3rd canto. My dear Lord, for persons who are engaged in the transcendental loving service, there is nothing worth obtaining from religious, economic development. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. All the happiness from these different sources can be very easily had by them. In spite of such facilities, my dear Lord, I do not aspire to achieve any such result. My only prayer is that I may have unflinching faith and devotion onto your lotus feet. So there is no aspiration. Then this is from 3rd canto. Kapil Dev speaks to Mother Devahuti. Devotees whose hearts are always filled in the service of my lotus feet and who are prepared to do anything for my satisfaction, especially those fortunate devotees who assemble together to understand my qualities, pastimes, and form, and thus glorify me congregationally and derive transcendental pleasure therefrom, never desire to become one with me. And what to speak of becoming one with me if they are offered a post like me in my abode, or opulence like mine, or even personal association with me, and similar bodily features they refuse to accept because they are satisfied simply by being engaged in my devotional service. So all kinds of liberation they reject. My dear Lord, the transcendental pleasure derived by meditation upon a lotus feet, which is enjoyed by the pure devotees, cannot be approached by the transcendental pleasure derived by the impersonalists through self-realization. So how can the fruity workers, who at most can aspire to promotion to the higher heavenly planets, understand you? And how can they be described as enjoying a happiness similar to devotees' happiness? So one infected with karma and gyan, he cannot attain that ultimate happiness. So that's the conclusion in this chapter. So eligibility is what we saw. And perfect or eligibility is there that one can take up devotional service, but the idea is that ultimately he should give up the desire for karma and gyan if he really wants to relish the transcendental bliss of pure devotional service. Till these two are there, or any other desires, Anyabhila is there, Anyabhilasha is there, it's not possible. Okay, so fourth chapter, till it comes from text 30 to 53. Okay, from 30 to 53, it's only references of from different scriptures, primarily from Srimad Bhagavatam, about how devotees completely reject liberation. Not impersonal liberation, but even liberation to the Vaikuntha planets. They completely reject that. Okay, so there is verse after verse after verse after verse. And if you see the context, then we discussed this, no? Srila Rupa Goswami, pure devotional service and impersonal liberation is actually opposed to each other. And this whole concept of becoming one with the Lord is completely opposed to pure devotional service. And this is the mood that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu cultivated. And in the same mood, Srila Rupa Goswami speaks these verses just to reiterate the fact that devotional service should not be done for getting free from material distress. Because that's a very strong motivating factor for one who takes up devotional service. But ultimately, he must give up this desire of getting liberated or fulfilling one's material desire. These two are not correct. So there are verses after verses in which the devotees pray to the Lord that they should be free from the desire for liberation. Or liberation is actually very insignificant as compared to your name, fame, glories, and pastimes. So there are different verses for that. So character of pure devotees is they reject all karma and gyan. Pure devotees never accept the four kinds of liberation if it hampers their service or it affects their service to the Lord. Among the liberated, some may develop affection for Krishna, and devotees of Krishna are the topmost. We will see this. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada writes that a devotee, how much a devotee is seriously attached to devotional service can be understood from the statement of Maharaj Prithu. He says, if after liberation I have no chance of hearing your glories, then I shall never ask for liberation. You please give me millions of tongues and millions of ears so that I can constantly chant and hear your transcendental glories. The impersonalist desire to merge, this is Srila Prabhupada writing. Impersonalists desire to merge into the accents of Supreme, but without keeping their individuality, they have no chance of hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord. So they do have individuality, even in individuality in the sense that they exist as an individual particle in Brahmajyoti, but they do not have their spiritual body manifest. They don't have their senses, the spiritual senses manifest. So there's no way they can hear the glories and chant the glories of the Lord. They just exist as a chitkana, as a spiritual particle in Brahmajyoti. Because they want to extinguish their identity. So therefore their identity, spiritual identity is also not manifest in the spiritual realm, although they are free from all material anxieties. So that is his impersonal liberation. So because without keeping their individuality, they have no chance of hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. Therefore devotees reject this kind of spiritual emancipation or liberation. They have no idea of the transcendental form of the Lord, so therefore they have no chance of their chanting and hearing. They think the transcendental form of the Lord is material. the Mayavadis specifically, they think the form of the Lord is material. So if they are rejecting everything material, why should they be inclined to hear the glories? Or why should they be inclined to chant the glories of Krishna? And even if they are doing that, they are doing that with the with that concept that ultimately impersonal liberation is the topmost, is the supreme. So their chanting and hearing is actually not spiritual, it's material. It does not purify them. Their taking up of devotional service so that they can come and attain impersonal liberation is only a farce, because that does not purify. If the goal or if the consciousness of a person who takes up to devotional service with an idea that the form of the Lord is material and his goal is impersonal liberation, then he's basically an offender to the Lord. And this kind of chanting and hearing is not spiritual, it is material. So it does not elevate him. It does not elevate him to transcendental consciousness. It degrades him more and more. So therefore it said Mayavadis always fall down. They fall down more than those material fruitive or those materialistic fruitive people who actually can elevate themselves to heavenly planets. But Mayavadis cannot. They cannot go to any higher realm because of offense to the Lord. They always go down to the lower regions. Therefore, their chanting and hearing infected with this Mayavad is not actually spiritual. It's only material. It does not elevate them. Because they have no chance of hearing and chanting of the transcendental form and transcendental activities of the Lord. You see? So unless one is already beyond liberation, one cannot relish the transcendental glories of the Lord, nor can one understand the transcendental form of the Lord. So each of these verses gives different characteristics of a pure devotee. How a pure devotee rejects the idea of liberation, what is his conception, what is his attitude. So I have made some notes here where for each of these verses I have written what exactly is the consciousness of a pure devotee or what is his thought process. You see, pure devotees reject all processes where there is no chance of hearing the glories of the Lord. So that's the characteristic of a pure devotee. Then this is Bharat Maharaj. This is Shukdev Goswami addressing Parikshit Maharaj about King Bharat, who easily gave up his lordship on children's society, friends, royal opulence like this. And he got attracted to the transcendental qualities of the Lord and did not care for liberation. So pure devotees are ready to easily give up all material comforts. Right? Then Vritrasura, he's praying to the Lord and he's saying, all I wish for my Lord is your association and transcendental service eternally. So pure devotees wish for Lord's association and transcendental service eternally. They do not desire liberation. Correct? This is a characteristic of a pure devotee. Right. Then this is Lord Shiva addressing Sati. So he says, this famous verse, Narayana Parasarva Nakutasthana Bibyati Sarga Pavarga Narakeshva Apitulyartha Darshinaha. So a devotee, in whichever situation he is, he's always in the same level. He's equanimous. In any position, he takes it as good as another. So he's not afraid of anything. So pure devotees are not fearful for anything. They do not care whether they are in the higher realm, whether they are in the Bhuloka, or whether in the lower planetary systems. Wherever they go, they only want to engage in pure devotional service. So even if I go to hellish planets, please make sure that I never forget you. Right? That's the prayer. So pure devotees are not fearful of anything. Then Indra addresses Mother Diti in 6th canto, that people who have given up all kinds of desire, simply engage in devotional service to the Lord, know what is actually their self-interest. Such persons are actually serving their self-interest and are considered first-class experts in the matter of advancing to the perfection stage of life. So pure devotees know their best self-interest and they are first-class experts, which is what this verse says. How do they serve their best self-interest? By engaging themselves in pure devotional service to Krishna. That is in their best self-interest. Right? Nate vidu swartha gati Vishnu. Swartha gati, our own self-interest is in Vishnu. But people do not know that. But pure devotees know that their best self-interest is in engaging in pure devotional service. This is Prahlad Maharaj praying, or rather speaking to his friends. Right. By this statement of Prahlad Maharaj, it is clearly understood that one who takes pleasure in chanting and hearing the transcendental glories of the Lord has already surpassed all kinds of material benediction, including the results of pious productive activities, sacrifices, and even liberation from the material bondage. So they are always relishing the nectar of the lotus feet of the Lord, and thus there is no necessity for any of these. which is spiritual emancipation or liberation from material bondage. So pure devotees always relish the nectar of the lotus feet of the Lord. So therefore, they are not affected by impersonal liberation or material activities. So this is Indra offering prayers to Lord Narsimha. After the Lord appeared, then Indra offers prayers. And then he says that we demigods think that we are the enjoyer of all sacrifices. We think we are the bhokta. But then we are not the bhokta. You are the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifices. You are the super soul of all living entity, and therefore you are the actual owner of everything. You have removed that fear from the heart of Hiranyakashipu and has given us a chance to place your lordship within our hearts again. For persons who are engaged in transcendental loving service, all the opulences which are taken away from us by the demons are counted as nothing. Hiranyakashipu had taken up everything from the demigods, but these are counted as nothing by pure devotees. Because they don't think that they are the enjoyers. They know that you are the enjoyer of everything. The purport is, no living entities are meant for enjoying material opulences. They're simply meant for offering everything to the personality of Godhead. By doing so, they automatically enjoy the benefit. The example can be cited again, different parts of the body, collecting foodstuffs and cooking them so that ultimately a meal may be offered to the stomach. So everyone's duty is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Pure devotees are not affected by opulence of the material world. They know who is the real enjoyer. So like this, so there are different references. We will not have time to go through all of them. So some points are, they are always merged in the ocean of transcendental bliss. So this refers to that particular statement. Then pure devotees are always satisfied in their position. Pure devotees don't care for any perfectional stages. And like this. So I think you can read this on your own. We will not have time to cover all this. Right. So these are references after references. Okay. And Srila Prabhupada also quotes 2 verses from Damodarashtakam. Param deva moksham na mokshavadim va nachanyam vrineham varishadapiya idam deva purnada gopalavam sadame manasya avrastam kimanai. Then Kuveratmajo verse also. Then Srila Prabhupada speaks about the story of the 2 sons of Kuvera. Gives that in his commentary. And then, then further references are there. Okay, so this says, in this connection, Prahlad Maharaj cited the example of Hanuman, the eternal servitor of Lord Ramchandra, who also set an example by never asking any material favor from the Lord. So after giving all these references, Sri Rupa Goswami says that in this connection, Prahlad Maharaj, he cited the example of Hanuman. He also never asked any material favor from the Lord. He always remained engaged in the Lord's service. That's the ideal character of Hanuman, for which he is still worshipped by all devotees. So this is a well-known verse spoken by Hanuman. And he says that I do not wish any of these things, which is salvation from material existence or privilege of merging into your existence. I do not want anything which diminishes my relationship with you as servant to master, even after liberation. So pure devotees reject that liberation which diminishes their relationship with the Lord. So a similar prayer that Prithu Maharaj also prayed. Right, and then there are further references. In the above verses, the most important thing to be noted is that there may be many liberated persons who have merged into the existence of the impersonal Brahman, but a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, is very, very rare. Even out of millions of liberated persons, only one is fortunate enough to become a devotee. So pure devotees are very rare and almost never to be seen. But they have given up anything which is not devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To give up the desire for karma and jnana is actually very difficult for a conditioned living entity. Therefore, pure devotees are very, very rare and are almost never seen. That's why it's also mentioned now that demigods want to take darshan of a pure devotee. They come down to take darshan of a pure devotee. Not that we have to go and worship the demigods. Right. Okay, so Sri Jiva Goswami, after these verses, which is decrying impersonal liberation and material productive activities, he writes all the verses since text, verse 23, have been proofs that those who desire the happiness of serving the Lord do not desire liberation. Now, starting with the present verse, the intention is to describe the efforts of such devotees to offer service to the Lord. So what efforts, how much effort they take to render service to the Lord, because that is what gives transcendental pleasure. That is what is proper. the constitutional position of a living entity. So there are verses, there are further verses which describe this. Then Atmanama verse is quoted. And Srila Prabhupada comments on that. That therefore we may conclude that glories and pastimes of the Lord are not material, because those who are Atmaramas, who are the most elevated spiritualists, they also take up to pure devotional service. They also become attracted by the name, fame, glories and pastimes of the Lord. So the above statement is found that devotees not after any stages of liberation. Then the 5 stages of liberation are there. Of these, the one which is known as Sayujya, or to merge into the excess of the Lord, is the last to be accepted by a devotee. The other 4 liberations, although not desired by devotees, still are not against the devotional ideals, because in these 4 stages, devotional service to the Lord is possible. Salokya, Samipya, Sarshti, Sarupya. The devotional service to the Lord is possible in these 4 types of liberation. Whereas in Sayujya, there is no chance of rendering any devotional service. Some of the liberated persons who have achieved these 4 stages may also develop affection for Krishna and be promoted to the Goloka Vrindavan planet in spiritual sky. You see this? This is important. That some of the liberated person who has gone to the Vaikuntha planets in the abode of Lord Vishnu or Narayana, some of them, they may develop affection for Krishna and be promoted to Goloka Vrindavan planet in the spiritual sky. So within the spiritual realm itself, there is gradation of pure devotional service. The Vaikuntha planets is on one level, but beyond above that, then there is Ayodhya, there is Dwarka, then Mathura, then Vrindavan, like this. So there is gradation also. And one who's already liberated, if he develops affection for Krishna, he can also go to the topmost planet. In other words, those who are already promoted to Vaikuntha planets and who possess the 4 kinds of liberation may also sometimes develop affection for Krishna and become promoted to Krishna Loka. So therefore, spiritual realm is also dynamic. It's not that we are fixed. If we want to associate with Krishna, it's also possible to go to those higher realms. So those who are in the 4 liberated states may still be going through different stages of existence. In the beginning, they may want the opulences of Krishna, but the mature stage, the dormant love for Krishna exhibited in Vrindavan, becomes prominent in their hearts. As such, the pure devotees never accept liberation of Sayujya, although sometimes they may accept as favorable the other 4 liberated states. You see, if you remember, we discussed that for a living entity, his constitutional position in the spiritual realm is fixed. When we were speaking about the rasas, Shantarasa, Dasrasya, Sakhirasya, Vatsalya and Madhurya, his position is fixed. Okay, and he experiences complete satisfaction there. But still, if he so desires to associate with the Lord, say it's like if he is liberated, he is in Vaikuntha planets, but he develops a desire to associate with Krishna in any of the relationships, then he can do that. That is also possible. Although he is completely satisfied in association with the Vaikuntha-vasis. But still, one can develop that desire. The possibility is there. That's what Srila Prabhupada is writing here. Okay. Out of many kinds of devotees, one who is attracted to the original form of Krishna in Vrindavan is considered to be the foremost or first class devotee. Such a devotee is never attracted by the opulence of Vaikuntha or even of Dwaraka, the royal city where Krishna ruled. The conclusion of Sri Rupa Goswami is that the devotees who are attracted by the pastimes of Lord in Gokula or Vrindavan are the topmost devotees. So within devotees also there is gradation, but we do not go and preach. But still it's understood that Krishna being Akhila Rasamrita Murti, you remember? We discussed this. All the rasas are complete in Krishna. Whereas Lord Narayana and the Vishnus in the Vaikuntha planets, they exhibit most of it, but not all of it. So therefore, pure devotees, topmost devotees are those who are fulfilling everything that Krishna desires. Krishna being Akhila Rasamrita Murti means he has all the rasas which he wants to reciprocate with his devotees. So 100% of the rasas he can reciprocate with one living entity, can reciprocate with the Lord when he's there or when he's a devotee of Krishna. Whereas for others, the Narayana forms in Vaikuntha planets, they exhibit only certain percentage, most around 93-94% of the total opulences of all the rasas. So therefore, exchange of rasas without Vishnu is not possible. You remember we discussed about this when we were discussing these 5 rasas, Shanta, Dasya, Sakhya, till Gaurava Sakhya rasa. Sakhya rasa also has these two, Gaurava Sakhya rasa and Vishrambhena Sakhya rasa. Vishrambha Sakirasa and Gaurav Sakirasa. Gaurav Sakirasa means when there's a friendship, but there's awe and reverence also. So to that point, rasa can be exchanged between the devotee and the Lord in the Vaikuntha planets. But beyond that point, Vishrambha, Sakhya, then Vatsalya and Madhurya, that's possible only in Goloka Vrindavan. So a living entity who wants to associate, wants to have that kind of relationship with the Lord, can elevate himself to Goloka Vrindavan as well after getting this liberation to the Vaikuntha planets. Right. Okay, so this ends our discussion on chapter 4. We'll go to chapter 5, the purity of devotional service. So here, this is a small chapter, but then very important points are mentioned. That devotional service is extremely pure. And purity in devotional service is attained by performing devotional service itself. Devotional service is open to all, so therefore there is no consideration of who is qualified for devotional service. But only after this much amount of purity, I can take up pure devotional service. So it's not like that. So some examples would be given for this. And bhakti purifies circumstantial fall down, so no other parashita is required. Devotees never take shelter of karma and gyan for any purpose, for any purificatory purposes. They may not have material desire, or they may not have desire for impersonal liberation also. But the Vedas do recommend different processes or prayashchittas for coming out from sinful activities which are inadvertently performed. But one should not take up to those activities also if he has taken up to pure devotional service. He does not have to take shelter of karma and gyan for any purpose. Persons engaged in fruitive activities, they only undergo repeated birth and death, whereas all deaths are cleared by pure devotional service. And Krishna takes special interest in his devotees because they become pure. So devotional service purifies them completely. Therefore, these are the characteristics of devotional service. So this is specifically speaking about the purity of devotional service, right? So all the previous instructions imparted by Srila Rupa Goswami in his broad statements can be summarized thus, which means all the statements which are mentioned in chapter 4 and the lower sections or the later sections of chapter 3. The summary is, as long as one is materially inclined or desirous of merging into the spiritual effulgence, one cannot enter into the realm of pure devotional service. Right? We have been discussing this. One who is materially inclined or desirous of merging into spiritual effulgence, he cannot enter into the realm of pure devotional service. So, if you see the definition or the eligibility of getting into Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti is one who is not fully attached or very intensely attached and who is not intensely detached also. So, he is eligible, but then he has to progress in that path also by gradually rejecting his attachment to material activities and also his too much detachment from material activity. He has to maintain his composure. The point is that one who is too detached, he has jnana as prominent, which means he takes up devotional service only to become free from material miseries. And that remains his driving factor throughout his life. Okay, so that conception has to be given up. We discussed this also, that initially one may take to devotional service by seeing the miseries of this material world. There are so many kleshas, adi bhautik, adhyatmik, adi daivik, and this birth, death, old age and disease. So we understand this is not our constitutional position. Therefore, we should take up devotional service to become free from these material miseries, to attain transcendental happiness like this. So there we are putting ourselves in the center. So this, although is an eligibility to take up devotional service, but we should not continue with the same consciousness, with the same attitude. That is the point. Similarly, one may have material desires and then he can take up devotional service. He's not very completely materially attached, but he may have material desires and he wants to fulfill those material desires and he can take up devotional service. But as he progresses, then he has to give up those material desires. He has to give up this idea of getting free from material miseries. Pure devotional service means it is meant only for satisfaction of Krishna. It is not meant for our own satisfaction, either through karma or through jnana, mitigation of material distresses in both ways. To fulfill material desires, that is not the goal. To mitigate material distress, that is not the goal. Pure devotional service is done only for the pleasure of Krishna. So that stage one should come to. That is pure devotional service. Devotional service is transcendental, not limited to any particular country, class, society, or circumstances. So one can take up pure devotion or do pure devotional service in any country. Does not matter which class he comes from, which caste he comes from, lower caste, upper caste, higher caste, whatever it is, in any society and in any circumstances. One can definitely take up devotional service. You see, yesterday we discussed, no, smartave satatam Vishnu, vismartave na jatuchit. One can fix his mind on Krishna. That is the base. And then all the other rules and regulations are subservient to this particular point of fixing one's mind in Krishna. So fixing one's mind in Krishna is completely within us. It's within our control, you can say. So it does not matter what the external circumstances are, one can still fix his mind on Krishna. Remembering Krishna. This is there, no? This fourth, chanting, hearing, and remembering. This also we discussed yesterday. So these are the aspects of devotional service. So one who remembers the Lord, he is performing pure devotional service. So it does not matter which country he belongs to, he can always think about Krishna. Which class he belongs to, he can always think about Krishna. Which society, which circumstances are there, he can always think about Krishna within his mind. So devotional service cannot be stopped in any time, place, or circumstances. It can always continue. It's not dependent on anything. Although some aspects are favorable to devotional service and some aspects are not. But even in unfavorable circumstances, one can render pure devotional service. That is possible. So devotional service is open for all and it is without any distinction. Then Srila Prabhupada speaks about the Nityananda Vamsha or the Goswami caste and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati struggle. So this you can read on your own, and this commentary by Srila Prabhupada is specifically for the purpose that some communities or within the Gaudiya Vaishnava community itself, some people say that devotional service is a prerogative of those people who come from a specific seminal line, either from the Nityananda Prabhu Vamsha or from Advaita Acharya's Vamsha. Only those can become gurus or spiritual master. Others should not become spiritual masters, should not become guru like this. But Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, on the strength of what Srila Rupa Goswami gave us, he smashed their ideas and he established that devotional service is open to everybody and everybody can take up, and one who has come to the level of Uttamadhikari, he can also make disciples. He can also make disciples. So Krishna consciousness movement is based on this transcendental principle. Anyone who is a pure Vaishnava is situated transcendently. And therefore, the highest qualification in the material world, namely to be in the mode of goodness, has already been achieved by such a person. On this authority, we are claiming members from all sections of Western countries. The so-called Brahmanas claim that one who is not born in Brahmana family cannot receive the sacred thread. It cannot become a high-grade Vaishnava. But we do not accept such a theory because Rupa Goswami did not support it, nor by the strength of various scriptures. So even scriptures do not support that. They also say that one can take up devotional service even if he is born from a low caste. We saw this, no? Vritrasura, what caste? He's a Rakshasa, but still he became a pure devotee. So in Padma Purana, the sage Vashishta tells, my dear king, everyone has a right to execute devotional service just as he has the right to take bath in the month of Magha. So just like everybody can take bath, everybody can take up devotional service also. It's open to everybody. Right. So thus the Vaishnava automatically becomes a Brahmana. The idea is supported by Sanatana Goswami in his book Hari Bhakti Vilas, that one who is initiated as a Vaishnava becomes a Brahmana, just like a bell metal is turned into gold by the mixture of mercury. So an expert alchemist can do this, Srila Prabhupada says, that he can turn bell metal into gold by expert addition of mercury. Right? Yatha kanchanatam yati kamsyam rasa vidhanata tatha diksha vidhanina dvijatam jayate nidam. So one who takes or one who is accepted as a disciple, one who goes through this diksha process, then dvijatvam jayate nidam. He automatically becomes a Brahmana. So this process can turn a low-born man into Brahmana by initiating him properly into Vaishnava activities. But the catch is that one who takes up this, then he should not think that because I have taken Diksha, therefore done, success, everything is achieved. He should not think that simply by acceptance of the initiation his business is finished. Or still has to follow the rules and regulations very carefully. So initiation is a starting process. It gives qualification. But after attaining the qualification, one has to perform the activities pertaining to that qualification as well. So Diksha is just a initiating point for one to take up devotional service. Then after that, one has to follow the rules and regulations. He must be very vigilant that to remember that he is part and parcel of the Lord, and it is duty to give service to Krishna. If we do not render service to Krishna, then again we fall down, although we have been initiated into devotional service. Even after taking Diksha, if one does not follow rules and regulations, does not render devotional service, he again falls down. Okay, so initiation is not the criteria. It's not the identity. Yes, it's not the identity of being a pure devotee of the Lord. One has to execute pure devotional service. Simply becoming initiated does not elevate one to the position of Brahmana. One has to discharge the duties and follow the regulative principles very rigidly. But if circumstantially there is some fall down, then he does not have nothing to do with prayaschitta. He just has to execute the rules and regulations, and this is enough to, this is sufficient for his reinstatement into pure devotional service. Practically, there are three processes for elevating one to the platform of spiritual consciousness. The process are called karma, jnana, and bhakti. Karma and jnana basically gradually do it, whereas bhakti situates oneself directly on the transcendental platform. Ritualistic performances and speculative performances are there, but one who has taken up to bhakti, he has nothing to do with karma or jnana. Bhakti should have no tinge of philosophical speculation or ritualistic performances. So this is what we have been discussing from last couple of chapters. Right. So in this connection, we will not have time to discuss this, but you can please go and read this from Srimad Bhagavatam, the 6th canto, chapter 1, text 15, translation and purport. It's a famous verse. Kechit kevalaya bhaktya vasudeva parayana agam dhunvanti katsniyana niharam iva bhaskaraha. It's a famous verse, and the translation and purport. Actually, the purport gives a very good summary of what we have discussed about pure devotional service. Right from the characteristics of pure devotional service, Kleshagni, Shubhada, and others, till this point. It's a very good summary. So you can please go ahead and read. We will not have time to discuss this here. Okay. Right. So then Srila Prabhupada continues. The purport, he gives references, Rupa Goswami's references, and then he says, this is a famous verse again, Tekva sudharvam charanambujam harer bhajan apakpotha patet tato yadi yatra kva vabhadram abhutamushyakim kovartha apto abhajatam sudharmataha. So one who has given up Tekva swadharmam, he has given up his prescribed duties, but has taken the shelter of Hari. Okay. Bhajan apakvo athapatet tato yadi. Even if he falls down, what is the loss for him? Yatra kva bhadram abhud amushyakim kovartha apto abhajatam sudharmataha. But what is the gain that one gets for performing all these prescribed duties, but then he is not a devotee of the Lord? So there is no loss for a person who gives up his prescribed duties but takes up pure devotional service. But then there is no gain for a person who does his prescribed duties very rigidly and properly, but is not a devotee of the Lord. So therefore, devotional service is the most important in everything. So purport is that conditioned souls who are engaged very practically in active sense gratification without knowing that this process will never help them get only repeated births and death. Person engaged in fruitive activities are repeatedly accepting birth and death until they develop a loving feeling for Vasudeva. So one who is engaged seriously in his occupational duties and who does not develop love for Supreme is spoiling his human form of life. One who is engaged only in varnashrama duties, his prescribed duties, but does not develop love for Krishna, is spoiling his human form of life. So that is why varnashrama is rejected. We discussed this yesterday. The concept of varnashrama is rejected because it is supposed to lead one to pure devotional service, to attraction to Krishna. Atha pumbedvaja sheshna varnashrama vivahasya swanushthitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshnam. Hari should be pleased. Lord should be pleased. That is the goal. But if one engages only ritualistic performances for different things, for dharma, artha, kama, for these purposes only, then it is just like spoiling one's human life. He is circulating, he is rotating within this material world in different species of life. Repeated birth and death. And similarly, it is understood that people who are generally attached to philanthropic, ethical, moral, and altruistic, political, and social welfare activities, they may be considered nice men, but only in the calculation of the material world. Whereas a person who simply acts in Krishna consciousness and discharges devotional service, he is to be considered far, far better situated than all those persons. Purification is to situate oneself in his eternal constitutional position as a devotee of the Lord, as a constitutional servant of the Lord. That is ultimate purity of a living entity. But there are so many things which are mentioned in the Vedic literatures with respect to Varnashrama Dharma, with respect to the four Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, like this. So in this chapter, Sri Rupa Goswami is rejecting all these ideas, saying Varnashrama principles are there, fine. Then you might have material desires, karma. Then you may have as a desire to merge into the absolute truth, impersonal liberation. But all these things are insignificant in comparison to pure devotional service. One who takes up pure devotional service, he becomes completely pure. He becomes transcendently happy. All his miseries are automatically mitigated. All his material necessities are automatically taken care of. The Lord himself comes and takes a devotee back home, back to Godhead. So all these different aspects is what we have discussed today. So these are the different angles which Srila Goswami gives, so that people who are reading this book take the pure devotional service seriously. That if you have any inclination towards karma, any inclination towards jnana, any inclination towards performing a prescribed duties rigidly, any inclination towards worshipping demigods, any inclination about worshipping of other people, or for impersonal liberation, all these things should be given up in comparison to what pure devotional service can give you. So therefore, pure devotional service is topmost. Everything else should be rejected. There's an eligibility, then it surpasses impersonal liberation, and then it is the purest of pure. So devotional service is what one should take up. Then he says that one who takes birth, one who has taken birth is immediately indebted to so many sources. He is indebted to great sages because he profits by reading their authoritative scriptures and books. So these are the 5 debts. Okay, which one has? As soon as he take birth, he is indebted to the great sages. Okay, that is there. Then he is indebted to the forefathers. So one has to perform these yagyas. One has to perform this Pitri Yagya, because he is indebted to the forefathers. Because they have given us everything. They have given us the culture, and they also give us, we inherit property from them. So therefore we are indebted to the forefathers and to offer them pinda after they are dead. Similarly, we are indebted to people in general, which is Bhuta Yagya. Bhuta Yagya, Pitri Yagya, Deva Yagya, Arsha Yagya, and there is one more. I will see. So Pitra Yagya and Arsha Yagya is what Srila Prabhupada mentioned here. Arsha Yagya is indebtedness to the sages. So therefore we have to give something to them in response to what they have given us. The forefather has given us something, we have to do something for them. That's Pitra Yagya that has to be performed. People in general is Bhuta Yagya, where we are indebted to our relatives, friends, and even animals. If you see in our life, we are taking many things from them. That's how it is, the setup is. We cannot avoid it. We cannot avoid taking from our parents, from our relatives, from our family. We cannot avoid taking from our forefathers. We cannot avoid taking from our higher authorities, the teachers. They have to teach. Correct? In this way, we are indebted to the demigods as well, to the forefathers, to the sages, to the animals, and to society in general. So there's one more. This is Atithi Yagya. So one who comes as a guest. Well, I'm not sure. Anyways, so these are the 4 we discussed. It's our duty to repay them all by proper discharge of service. By one stroke of devotional service, one is no longer indebted to any of them. So he does not have to perform activities for fulfilling his debt towards the forefathers. No need to offer pinda. Okay, it's revolutionary, but then you don't have to if one has taken up pure devotional service. To the sages, we offer Vyas Puja to the spiritual master, to all the devotees we pay our respects every day. So therefore that is taken care of. Then to the demigods, they are being the part and parcel of the Lord, being the bodily part of the universal form of the Lord. By worshipping the Lord, they are also satisfied. So that way all the yagyas or all the debts that we have, it's completely fulfilled by taking up pure devotional service. So the Lord says that by surrendering unto Him, He will give all protection. This is the assurance of Lord Krishna. So therefore, we don't have to worry if we are not able to perform our prescribed duties based upon our varna and ashrama. As the regulatory principles of scriptures are not required by liberated person, so the ritualistic principles indicated in the Vedic supplements are also not required for a person duly engaged in the service of Lord Ramachandra. In other words, the devotees of Lord are already liberated persons. They are not required to follow all the regulatory principles mentioned in the ritualistic portions of the Vedic literature. So, okay, in this connection itself, I would again suggest please go and read Canto 6, Chapter 1, Text 15, purport. Okay, please read. No, it gives everything, or it puts everything into very nice perspective. Finally, it's confirmed in Bhagavad Gita in many places that the Supreme Personality of God Krishna takes a special interest in his devotees and declares emphatically that nothing can cause his devotees to fall down. He is always protecting them. So Krishna always protects his devotees. That's the conclusion. Okay, so this is the end of chapter 5. From 6 to 14, we'll be speaking about the 64 limbs of devotional service. Okay, chapter 6 gives a list of the 64 items or angas of devotional service. And from chapter 7, there's elaboration of those items with references from scriptures. So tomorrow we will not be studying chapter 6 at all because it's just a list. And for some of the items of devotional service, Srila Prabhupada gives an elaborate commentary. Okay, and that elaborate commentary we will take when the corresponding item comes after the 7th chapter, after the 7th chapter. For example, Srila Prabhupada writes about deity worship, saying that as an anga of devotional service, that one must do deity worship it's an anga of devotional service. And then in bracket, he gives different things or different aspects of deity worship. So this will be elaborated in subsequent chapter, either in chapter 7, 8 or 9, like this. So at that time, I'll also include the comment which Srila Prabhupada gave for chapter 6, and then we'll study in that context itself. So tomorrow, before coming, you can just read chapter 6 to know what are the 64 items of devotional service, and we'll directly start from, just with a brief introduction to chapter 6, we'll directly start from chapter 7 itself. Okay. Fine. So stop here. Any questions? No. Okay. So stop. Srila Prabhupada ki